Good afternoon, I'm Katie Wilson. You are watching Anewz. Let's see your headlines. World leaders react after Trump's threat to impose 30% tariffs on all imports from the EU and Mexico. President Trump says the US will send Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine. Far-right anti-migrant groups clash with police in Spain. Tensions are intensifying once again between the US and key trading partners. At the weekend, President Trump threatened to impose a 30% tariff on imports from Mexico and the European Union, starting on the 1st of August. This has sparked strong political pushback and rattled financial markets across the globe.
US President Donald Trump has defended his administration's latest tariff hikes, which have sparked global concern and sharp criticism. On Saturday, Trump announced 30% tariffs on imports from the European Union and Mexico, effective from the 1st of August. He later claimed that tariff revenue had already reached record levels. Trump argued the US has long faced unfair trade practices, singling out the EU and Japan.
Our country made $25 billion last month, $25 billion. It hasn't done that in a long time, and a lot of that's done because of good management, and number one, and maybe even more importantly, the tariffs that are pouring in. We have tariffs pouring in at levels that we have never seen before, and they've only just started. That's really a small portion.
The move has sparked immediate backlash. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the tariffs will hurt businesses and consumers on both sides of the Atlantic. While the EU has paused countermeasures until early August, leaders warned they're preparing a strong response.
The United States have sent us a letter with measures that would come into effect unless there is a negotiated solution. So we will therefore also extend the suspension of our countermeasures till early August. And at the same time, we will continue to prepare further countermeasures so we are fully prepared.
France's Emmanuel Macron urged Brussels to act decisively, and Sweden's Prime Minister called the move a unilateral escalation. Germany's Vice-Chancellor Lars Klingbeil warned that Trump's actions threaten both the American and European economies. Meanwhile, Spain and others have reiterated their support for EU-led negotiations. On the other side of the Atlantic, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum called the move unfair, saying Mexico's sovereignty is non-negotiable. The country's ministries vowed to defend national interests, but emphasized ongoing negotiations. Trump has also threatened Canada with a 35% tariff, linking it to alleged fentanyl trafficking and trade imbalances. Markets reacted with volatility. Investors have become largely accustomed to Trump's policy methods, and stocks eased only moderately, while the dollar gained little on the euro.
The European Union is sounding the alarm over a possible 30% tariff from the United States, warning it could all but eliminate trade between the two sides. EU Trade Commissioner Maroš Šefčovič says despite the threat, negotiations are moving in a positive direction. Speaking ahead of a meeting with EU ministers in Brussels, he stressed that both parties are close to reaching a deal. Šefčovič also highlighted the EU's enormous patience and creativity in trying to secure a fair outcome and avoid a damaging trade standoff.
We have been negotiating this agreement in principles for weeks, and I think that we've been almost there. And of course, there have been some sectoral issues upon which we've been negotiating. So my sense was we are approaching, the good outcome for both sides. I appreciate, though, that I was getting the heads up just before the letter was coming. And of course, I clearly recorded my disappointment about this measure because it puts us into a totally different dynamic. But nevertheless, I felt also from my United States counterparts that despite that letter, they are ready to continue the negotiations.
Well, the countdown to a major trade clash is on. President Trump's threats to slap a 30% tariff on key European exports from cheese and wine to steel and cars is causing Brussels to create a retaliation list, warning that if the US hits hard, the EU will hit back.
from French vineyards to Italian cheese factories, from Spanish ham producers to German grain farms. Europe's food and agricultural industries are bracing for impact. President Donald Trump's new 30% tariff threatens to choke off a major export pipeline to the US, according to experts. These aren't just luxury items, they're multi-billion euro industries. A sudden drop in US demand could mean overstocked warehouses, halted orders, and production lines running slow, say analysts. In response, a wide range of American goods could soon face new European Union tariffs as well, such as meat and vegetables to textiles and machinery. Brussels says its list is ready to target billions of euros in US exports if Washington goes ahead with its 30% tariff on EU products. Last year, the EU exported more than 40 billion euros worth of cars to the US. French wines, Italian spirits, German cheese, and European steel are all part of a trade relationship valued at 1.7 trillion euros annually. Now, those sectors could be hit hard. As the clock ticks down to the 1st of August, industries across the EU are watching nervously and preparing for what could be the biggest transatlantic trade clash in years. The European Commission says it's still hoping for a breakthrough, but with less than 3 weeks to go, businesses are being told to prepare for disruption. The stakes are high, and industries on both sides, including automotive, agriculture, and pharmaceuticals, are bracing for impact.
Well, over to Ukraine. At least 6 people have reportedly been killed by the latest Russian drone strikes overnight. Multiple regions, including Dnipropetrovsk, Sumy and Kharkiv, came under fire.
Around 136 Russian drones were launched overnight across Ukraine, according to officials, with 60 being intercepted. They hit Sumy, Dnipropetrovsk and Kharkiv, as well as other areas. According to the Dnipropetrovsk Regional Administration, air defence units shot down 10 drones during Sunday night. 3 people were injured in Dnipro city, including 2 teenage girls. The Sumy Regional Military Administration confirmed deadly attacks in Shostka, which killed 2 men on the street when the area was hit. 4 people in a nearby apartment building were injured, including a 7-year-old child. Meanwhile, in Shostka, around 30 residential and non-residential buildings were damaged and civilian infrastructure was destroyed. Drone strikes were also reported in Kharkiv, Chernihiv and Mykolaiv as Russia intensifies its attacks far from the front lines. The assaults come as US Special Envoy Keith Kellogg arrives in Kyiv for talks on security and sanctions against Russia.
President Trump is set to meet with NATO chief Mark Rutte in Washington. This follows his announcement to supply missiles to Ukraine amid growing frustration over Russia's unwillingness to end the war in Ukraine.
NATO chief Mark Rutte will visit Washington, D.C. on Monday and Tuesday, where he will meet U.S. President Donald Trump, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. The 2-day meeting comes after Trump announced a plan to supply weapons to Ukraine through the Security Alliance. Under the deal, U.S. weapons, in particular Patriot air defense missiles, would be transferred to Ukraine and paid for by the European Union. Trump says sending Patriot air defense missiles to Kyiv is necessary due to Russia's unpredictability in ending the war, as he becomes increasingly frustrated with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I haven't agreed on the number yet, but they're going to have some because they do need protection. But the European Union is paying for it. We're not paying anything for it, but we will send it. It'll be business for us, and we will send them Patriots, which they desperately need, because Putin really surprised a lot of people. He talks nice, and then he bombs everybody in the evening. So there's a little bit of a problem there, and I don't like it.
Earlier this month, the U.S. had suspended weapons shipments to Ukraine, citing concerns about depleting its own stockpiles. So far, the Trump administration has only sent weapons authorized under former U.S. President Joe Biden. While the number of missiles under the new NATO-backed deal remains unclear, it signals Trump's growing disillusionment with Putin, who has resisted his efforts to negotiate a ceasefire.
President Trump's envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, has arrived in Kyiv for a scheduled week-long visit. Kellogg held talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky upon arrival. His visit comes ahead of Trump's meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, where military aid to Ukraine will be a key topic of discussion. Strengthening US-Ukraine cooperation is also on the agenda. This marks Kellogg's second visit to Ukraine this year. French President Emmanuel Macron has announced an accelerated plan to boost France's defence spending. France had planned to double its defence budget by 2027 to 64 billion euros. Macron says the boost will be funded by increased economic activity and has been prompted by the uncertainty of the geopolitical landscape. His statement comes as NATO members earlier agreed to increase defence spending to 5% of their GDP.
Have a look again at the acceleration of events in recent months. The bombing on Iran, the fighting between India and Pakistan, with arguably one of the most intense air battles in recent decades, the ups and downs in American support for Ukraine, and the trade war between allies in this same context. Yes, we are witnessing the return of the nuclear phenomenon, the proliferation of major conflicts.
President Trump says he's hopeful a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas could be reached soon. Washington is backing a 60-day ceasefire plan that includes the gradual release of hostages, a partial withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, and broader negotiations to end the war. Trump told reporters that efforts are ongoing and a breakthrough may happen in the coming days. Violent clashes erupted in southeastern Spain near Murcia over the weekend as far-right anti-migrant groups confronted riot police and local residents. The unrest followed the assault of an elderly man earlier in the week on Wednesday. On Saturday, authorities say fights broke out between far-right groups, locals and North African migrants. The motive for the initial assault remains unclear. One person was arrested while 5 people were injured. Tourists were stunned after migrant boats arrived on the popular beaches of the Greek island of Crete. The landings come just days after Greece suspended asylum processing for sea arrivals from North Africa, a move drawing criticism from rights groups.
Agia Galini's beaches turned into an unexpected landing site this week as migrant boats from North Africa arrived at the popular Crete resort. On Friday, 94 people were moved from a local facility to Souda port, then ferried to Piraeus and transferred to the Malakasa camp near Athens, leaving many tourists stunned.
They come about 420 people, and they come and they set them down, and they don't have to stay up, they have to stay down. And we are lying on the beach there. And it was very strange for us.
I was very shocked because many boats arrived and I don't know what it is. And then I see how the boats will arrive in the harbor and people come and come and come and another boat will come and a bus will come.
The Greek government's decision to temporarily suspend asylum processing for North African sea arrivals has sparked backlash from rights groups who say the move violates international law. While total sea arrivals to Greece fell by 5.5% in the first half of this year, landings in Crete and the nearby island of Gavdos have quadrupled, reaching over 7,000 since January.
I think there are 50, 60 people in one such a boat. I can't imagine it.
Greece, once the epicenter of Europe's 2015 to 2016 migrant crisis, is once again grappling with rising arrivals on its southern islands. But as the government tightens its policies, tourists and locals alike are left to confront a new reality washing ashore.
France has unveiled a new agreement offering greater autonomy to New Caledonia, a move Paris described as historic. However, it falls short of the full independence long demanded by many indigenous Kanaks. Anita Sharma has more from Paris.
An historic breakthrough emerges from here in Paris this weekend with a landmark agreement over New Caledonia. That's the French Pacific territory, almost 17,000 kilometers from Paris, that has faced cycles of unrest and political tension. After 10 days of intense negotiations with French President Emmanuel Macron personally taking part, leaders from both pro-independence Kanak movements and loyalist factions reach an accord to designate New Caledonia as a, quote, state of New Caledonia within the French Republic, enshrined in France's constitution. Let's get to the key parts of this deal now. Dual nationality and institutional status. New Caledonians will hold a special Caledonian nationality alongside French citizenship, and the territory will gain a customized institutional framework. Transfer of sovereign powers. While defense, justice, currency, and security powers remain with Paris for now, the accord paves the way for these to be transferred later, subject to local referendums. Cultural symbols and identity. The deal may also allow New Caledonia to adopt its own name, flag, anthem, and a formal citizenship code, further reinforcing its distinct identity. Let's get to expanded electorate now. The electoral franchise will be enlarged. Anyone born in New Caledonia or with at least 15 years continuous residence will gain provincial voting rights. That was one of the key triggers of the violence that occurred last year. This change could add more than 12,000 new voters, significantly impacting the balance of power in a territory where regional voters determine the composition of the local Congress. And finally, economic reform, especially with nickel. An economic refoundation package was agreed upon with targeted support for the nickel sector, which is vital to the local economy. The historic compromise follows last year's deadly riots triggered by changes to voter rolls. The unrest resulted in 14 fatalities, and with some reports citing approximately 3 billion euros in damages. Macron says this is an historic deal and a new chapter, emphasizing that it represents a bet on trust. The Baku Initiative Group has also played an active role here, helping bring international attention to this issue and supporting New Caledonia's right to self-determination. But the process still faces more steps here. The agreement must be ratified by the French Parliament later this year. A local referendum in New Caledonia is expected by early 2026, allowing citizens to approve the transfer of powers. If approved, New Caledonia could gain enhanced sovereignty, including possible UN membership, while remaining tied to France. This is significant because it firstly creates a novel institution model, not just independence, but a semi-sovereign state status inside France, setting a potential precedent for other overseas territories, as well as regions such as Corsica, which is seeking greater autonomy within France. On the strategic front, this safeguards France's presence in the geopolitically critical Pacific amid rising competition from China and the United States. Economically, success depends on revitalizing the nickel industry, which underpins local employment and growth. Politically, it offers a pathway to diffuse communal tensions, but whether it heals long-standing divides remains to be seen. Reporting from Paris for Anewz, I'm Anita Sharma. Now, back to Baku.
A high-level trilateral meeting has kicked off in Brussels between Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, European Council President Antonio Costa, and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The meeting focused on EU-Armenia ties and peace in the South Caucasus. Von der Leyen called the draft treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan a seismic moment. She expressed hope that the agreement, which could end decades of hostility, will be signed soon. Georgia's foreign trade turnover saw a notable rise in the first 6 months of the year. Preliminary figures from the country's statistics office show that both exports and imports are on the rise, but the trade deficit remains significant. According to the National Statistical Committee, Georgia's foreign trade turnover reached almost $12 billion from January to June, up 12.7% year on year. Exports rose by nearly 14%, totalling just over $3.2 billion, while imports climbed to almost $8.7 billion. Despite the growth, the trade deficit stood at $5.5 billion. Another wildfire has broken out in Turkey's Izmir just days after a series of blazes swept through the region. So far this summer, hundreds of fires have erupted in the country, forcing nearly 50,000 people to evacuate their homes.
Helicopters dropped water to try to extinguish the latest forest wildfire in Turkey in the western province of Izmir on Sunday. In the district of Urla, firefighting teams battled to contain the blaze amid thick smoke and rising flames. 4 planes, 13 helicopters and 34 fire trucks were deployed according to the local forestry authority. Meanwhile, further north of the country, authorities say they've managed to contain a forest fire on the Yalova-Bursa border, which broke out near a village in Yalova's central district and a nearby neighborhood in Bursa. Helicopters, water trucks, a first response vehicle and personnel were deployed. Officials also reported that around 3 hectares of forest were damaged before the flames were brought under control through coordinated air and ground efforts. The latest fires come amid one of the most intense wildfire seasons Turkey has faced in recent years. In Izmir, 2 people were killed in fires earlier this month. Hundreds of blazes have scorched large areas of forest across the country this summer, forcing around 50,000 people to evacuate from their homes.
Syria has signed its first major international deal since US sanctions were lifted at the end of June. The $800 million agreement with Dubai Ports World aims to modernise the Tartus port on the Mediterranean. President Ahmed al-Shara, who leads Syria's transitional government, was present at the signing ceremony. This move marks a significant shift in the country's economic direction following the end of Bashar al-Assad's rule. Well, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan called for full support of the disarmament of the PKK, a step he said opened a new page for the country. Joining us now to unpack this is Dr. Yusuf Keskin, the director of Amasya University Social and Strategic Research Centre. Thank you for being with us. Now, to start off, what does disarmament really mean? Do we have any timeline as to when this process will be completed?
Turkey, as you know, has been fighting with terrorism for many years. In the middle of 20th century, we fought with Armenian terrorism, Asala. Since 1980s, PKK. In recent years, in the Middle East, we are fighting with IS or Daesh, however you call. But about PKK process, important developments are happening in Turkey. We are reaching to the end of armed struggle, armed fight. At least inside Turkey, it's like that. We will follow how things develop in Iraq or Syria or Iran. Actually, during this process, Turkey went through very hard, very difficult times. In foreign policy, our alliances were seriously tested with US, with Russia, with other Middle Eastern countries. Also some allied actors supported PKK terrorism, terrorist group PKK. But we looked at international relations don't work like that. We will discuss today and we will look to tomorrow. For today, it's a fact that the PKK terrorist organization lost its fight against Turkish armed forces.
Isn't there a danger of an internal conflict within the PKK? What about those who disagree with this decision and might form their own militant groups? How much is that a concern?
We will look for the process. This truth is still out there, clear and obvious. And actually, the details of the PKK's disarmament timeline will be clear. But this is my personal opinion. Everyone wants to give peace a chance for the peace. From now on, we think about what will happen inside of PKK. The most important threshold was disarmament for Turkey, for security, for foreign policy, for many other measures for Turkish people. But we will see what will happen to the future of PKK militants. Will entire organization accept disarmament? We are very curious about it. But is there a risk of internal conflict within the PKK? Because those opposing this decision might form their other own militant groups. And yes, this threat is generally always valid when a terrorist organization surrenders or makes peace. Some groups, that terrorist organization, may reject this. This can emerge also. It's another possibility. The same applies to PKK terrorist organization. Moreover, the PKK is active in some other countries like Syria, like Iraq, like Iran. Only the names are different. So there are some internal balances within the organization. And this disarmament process has created a sense of defeat in some parts of terrorist organization. They are entirely about clearly.
Thank you very much for your insights then and for joining us on the programme, and apologies if you experienced any technical difficulties there. Now, in Kabul, major strides are being made towards boosting Afghanistan's energy sector. The leadership of Afghanistan has met with investors from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to explore new opportunities for power generation in the country.
The CEO of the Afghanistan Brezhna Shirkat, Dr. Abdul Bari Umar, welcomed energy investors from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan at the company's headquarters in Kabul, where discussions focused on expanding investment in Afghanistan's power generation sector. Dr. Umar briefed the delegation on the vast opportunities available for energy production, highlighting the government's readiness to support both national and international partners. He emphasized that electricity production remains a top priority for state-owned company, noting that the organization has previously worked with foreign investors under similar frameworks. The visiting investors laid out their proposals for initiating both large and small-scale power projects. They also presented plans to support Afghanistan's engineering sector by offering technical training programs for local talent. This meeting signals a growing international interest in Afghanistan's energy infrastructure, which remains one of the country's most critical needs. With promises of cooperation and mutual benefits, the talks mark a hopeful step toward expanding electricity access in Afghanistan. This is Tamim Bahiz in Kabul for Anewz.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to Anewz.